force.
Infrastructure is so huge. So we have to rethink what kinds of trucks, what kinds of warehouses, what kinds of grocery stores, what kind of processing facilities for both meat products and dairy products. We need to think about regulations. All of these things are infrastructure that actually aid in getting the food off the farm and to our plate. And we have to rethink those. A lot of those are oriented towards a global food production system and supply system. And they're not oriented, they're not very efficient right now for local or regional supply chains. You know, the scale isn't right. Or, you know, we don't really need semis to run around with this. We might need smaller refrigerated trucks.
You're saying for more local?
For more local,
for regionally based?
Yeah, for regionally based kinds of things. Okay. And we really have to, you know, the agribusiness has spent a lot of money investing in, we know that you're supposed to store avocados at this temperature and onions at this and this humidity. Well, local people need to learn that kind of things. There's a lot of knowledge that they have to get back, but they also have to be able to have the warehouses where you can separate. You know, when farmers bring in a lot of different kind of product, the lettuce can go over here, and it's you know, the broccoli can go over here, and you know, there's just a lot of things to think about in recreating that infrastructure that actually gets food grown and dispersed in a local or regional area.
As I hear you speak, I'm curious about where the oversight happens.
Well,
who's minding the store in this sense?
Well, you know, we can use some sorts of existing infrastructures. I mean, we've got smaller groceries that may start to use locally produced food if it were graded and packed and delivered to their store, you know. So then we might need a grading and packing arena. And we have, you know, we'll have to comply with the existing food safety laws. But that's another area. The regulatory infrastructure for local foods has to be rethought. Okay. And I think food safety, I think we can do our food safety regimes right now are really oriented to a global system and to a kind of a centralized system. So if you think back, this is a food safety failure, but if you think back to the E. coli in spinach,
yes.
Okay, so, you know, E. coli entered the food chain somewhere, they think from feral animals in the field, but they're not sure, entered the food chain, it was processed and dispersed to a lot of places, right? And then it ended up in, you know, the East Coast, and it actually came from the West Coast and so on. And that has to do because we have a centralized food system. So if you're a regulator and you're thinking about how can we control that, we don't want that to happen again. You don't think about, you know, it'd be really smart if we had, you know, 100 spinach packing plants rather than one, right? You think, what can I do at that packing plant? Well, I can institute a HACCP plan, a hazard analysis at critical control points.
That particular plant?
That plant. And I can require that plant to do that. And then that plant will require all the farmers to do that. And it becomes this real interesting regime that kind of applies to the lowest common denominator at this bigger scale.
Yeah.
But that food safety regime might not make any sense for Missouri farmers. You know, we haven't really had a case of people getting sick from eating Missouri produce, right? So, you know, we might not need that same food safety regime. We might need something different that's more locally applicable. And this happens with poultry processing, with meat processing, with, you know, with the dairy plants. So what kind of food safety regime ensures food safety for people? I'm not wanting, you know, I don't want any risky food out there, but does it in a way that works for that local area, works for eaters and works for farmers. And I think those things are something that's going to have to be in dialogue.
It's a question of scale.
It is a question of scale. And we have a lot of standards that have been developed because we have these global production and supply networks that are, you know, we're getting, if you go into St. Louis and you go to the produce terminal market there, you will be able to get food from 58 different countries and all 50 states. Well, not yet, all 50. You can, probably not Alaska, but the rest of them. You get that much food coming in there. That's a lot of food to regulate. It's a lot of food coming from lots of places and then centralized and then distributed out. If we had lots of those produce terminals, if we didn't have it coming from all of these different places, we could think about a much different food safety, food quality regime.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the kinds of things I mean about regulatory infrastructure, and and we need to support business planning and financing for some of these kinds of things. Zoning is a big issue for community. In cities, there's a lot of anxiety about allowing people to keep small livestock like chickens or rabbits,
Mm-hmm.
for food, and there's ways to manage that so that people could actually keep their own livestock, and it wouldn't be a human health hazard.
If I'm hearing you correctly, it sounds like you're saying that there is no one size fits all.
Exactly.
So that one set of regulations that might fit sort of global food production in a sense,
Right.
may not work for different localities where food
Right.
is being produced in for a local or regional market.
Right. And I'm not saying that we should just say, we got to believe the farmers who are saying this, or that, somebody who comes up with their own food safety ideas. I'm saying that we can ask for help from experts, from people who really understand food safety and foodborne illnesses and so on. But those ought to be applicable to the way we farm and produce things and process and distribute in that particular area. And so, yeah, it is a matter of scale. And then I think there's zoning issues in the community about farmland production, and then there's community gardening. Can we set aside, can we put a priority on land being used for community gardening, for urban agriculture?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, can't that be as high a priority as commercial space? And is that something we want in our communities? I think those are planning things we can do.